Hello children, today we are going to discuss moving coil galvanometer. In the previous video we discussed that whenever a current carrying loop is placed, the magnetic field experiences a magnetic torque, it experiences a couple and therefore it develops a torque which sets the loop into rotation, right? So using this we are going to discuss an important device called moving coil galvanometer. We are going to discuss moving coil galvanometer, and children, is a device which is based on the fact that whenever a current carrying loop is placed in a magnetic field, it experiences a torque and therefore starts rotating, right? Moving coil galvanometer is a very sensitive instrument actually for detecting small currents. We will be using moving coil galvanometer. You've seen in a lab, generally it is zero centered, but it may not be zero centered also, right? So we should remember that whenever a current carrying coil is placed in magnetic field, it experiences a torque, and this is the working principle of a moving coil galvanometer, right? So we'll be discussing what is the construction of moving coil galvanometer, right? Okay. Okay. So here you can see that it has two poles, right? These are poles of a horseshoe magnet, and the special thing is that these two poles are concave, right? Concave poles. Here we are placing a soft iron cylinder, and then a coil is placed in center of, actually this is the top view. When you see from the side, from the top, this is how you will see it, right? You will see the cross section here. The soft iron cylinder, this is the center, and here we have a coil. Is a rectangular coil is having large number of turns, right? We have shown only one turn, but then it can have very large number of turns actually. It can have very large number of turns. The coil at the two ends actually is supported by Joule springs which can move, and then we have spindle and a spring here. The spring is very special. It is made up of phosphor branch fiber, because phosphor branch fiber has got very small restoring torque when it can be twisted very easily. And then the coil, remember here, is placed inside this soft iron cylinder. Now the magnetic field provided by these poles which are concave is radial. Be very clear about it. It is what? Radial. The magnetic field goes like this. This is how it goes and emerges at this. The magnetic lines of force that are traveling from north pole to the south pole. Anywhere, suppose they take this one. This is how the lines are coming out. This is how the lines are coming out. A line coming from here will be parallel to the coil, right? Similarly, I can take from here. So all these lines are going to pass to the this is a scale, this is a pointer. Let's see. When I look at this is the top view. This is a permanent magnet. Permanent magnet. Actually, this permanent magnet is a horseshoe magnet like this. These are the poles, and these poles are cylindrical. Why the poles are cylindrical, I'll tell you. The magnetic lines of force, you can see they are traveling from the north pole like this, and they are going into the south pole, right? This is the south pole. They are going into the south pole. We have a soft iron cylinder which is placed inside, and then we have the coil here. The coil is rectangular. Now, why are we using soft iron cylinder? It's very important, because soft iron cylinder, two reasons. Soft iron cylinder provides a stronger field by concentrating the magnetic lines of force. Very important. You know that it gets magnetized very easily. It has a very large value of magnetic permeability, means it can capture the magnetic lines of force. Now, the soft iron core, in fact, here you can see the circular cross section, ensures that the field lines are always perpendicular to the plane of the coil. For example, and here, in whatever position the coils will rest, the magnetic field lines are parallel to the coil. Suppose the coil is here in this position, right? Then this is how the magnetic field will be directed, parallel to the coil. If it is parallel to the coil, it will be perpendicular to the what? Area vector. Very important concept. The concave poles make sure that the field lines are radial. They are what? Radial. And if it is radial, then obviously the field lines will be perpendicular to the what? Plane of the coil. Right? Suppose the coil becomes like this. Coil becomes like this. Here also, magnetic field will be parallel to the coil or perpendicular to the area vector. Right? So we are using concave poles. They will ask you why the mat has got concave poles. The reason is these concave poles provide the necessary radial field. And the advantage of using this radial field is that this field will be always parallel to the coil, no matter in what way. The coil comes like this, then also. If it comes like this, then also. Becomes like this, then also. The magnetic field lines or the magnetic field will be parallel to the coil or perpendicular to the area vector of the coil, right? So that's always there. Theta is how much? 90 degree. So concave poles are used for providing radial magnetic field, so that the field is always perpendicular to the area vector or parallel to the coil, right? And the soft iron cylinder helps in concentrating the magnetic lines of force, so that it can make the field what? Stronger. Field lines will not be able to escape. Suppose I am using flat poles like this. Let's understand it. Suppose I am using flat poles like this. This is north pole and south pole. So some of the magnetic lines of force will be escaping like this. So if I put the coil here, I am not able to provide what? The maximum magnetic field, because some of the field lines will be escaping. So this is the top view. If you see the side view of this device, let's see the side view is what? Side view is, we have concave poles out here. So when you look at the side view, this is north pole and this is south pole. Here you have the soft iron cylinder. This is coil, this is soft iron cylinder. This is the copper coil having large number of turns, and these are the two springs that I have shown. Only one is shown here when you look at the top view. This is the spring that we are seeing. The two springs, one is above and the other is below. So the coil will turn this side or will turn this side. In both the cases, they will be twisting in the springs, right? So these are the poles of concave poles of the horseshoe magnet, which is providing the necessary centripetal or necessary central or radial magnetic field like this, right? This is what you have shown here by these lines. So this is front view. and this is top view, and this is coil. Okay children, the construction is clear. So once again I will explain. It has a permanent magnet with concave poles. Concave poles are used for providing radial magnetic field, means field is always directed along the radius. The second advantage of using concave poles is that the magnetic field is perpendicular always to the area vector of the coil, or magnetic field is parallel to the coil. Both ways we can remember this. Theta will be this case how much? 90. This cylindrical soft iron cylinder which is inserted inside between the poles helps us in concentrating magnetic field lines, maintains that they are perpendicular to the area vector, right, and increases the intensity of magnetic field inside the coil. Then you can see that the coil is connected with, here we have two hair springs. These hair springs are made up of phosphor branch fiber. Springs are made up of phosphor branch fiber. Now this coil is special. The coil is having a frame, light frame, which is made of aluminium, and the wires are made up of copper, right? Now here we have a pointer. It has a light pointer which is also made up of aluminium, and you can see this is a scale. Same thing here also we have a scale. Here both the rings have been shown, both the springs have been shown, and these are Jewel springs, Jewel screws which are being used to hold it in place, and the current which is to be measured will be connected across these two what? Screws, or the Jewel springs here. This is terminal T1 and this is terminal T2. You can connect the current which you want to measure, right? So construction will see. Construction, it has what parts it has? It has a permanent magnet, copper coil, and aluminium pointer. Aluminium pointer and a linear scale. Now we also have so many galvanometers which are zero centered. Zero centered meaning they have zero in the middle, and then we have graduation on the left starting from 1 onwards, and then graduations on the right. So you can have either way. You can start from 0 left 0 or 0 centered, right? So this is the construction. Permanent magnet with concave poles, soft iron cylinder, hair springs, copper coil, aluminium pointer, and a linear scale. Clear? Now see how exactly it works, right? Working of moving coil galvanometer. Okay. Now actually we are going to discuss what is working of the moving coil galvanometer. It's very simple. Whatever current I want to measure, the current will be connected across these terminals T1 and T2. Suppose I connect here a source of current. Okay, suppose I connect a source of current here. This source of current, let plus and then I'll mark minus, right? Like this. When I close the key, then a current will be set up in the circuit. And children, this current is going to right flow through the what? It's going to flow right through the coil. And when a current will flow through this coil, then you already did in the last video we discussed that when current flows through a coil, then the coil experiences a torque, right? So suppose the number of turns is N, we have shown only one turn, but in truth this coil has got many turns. It has many turns like this. It has many turns. This is how the coil is. When current will flow through this coil, then the coil will experience a torque. And when it will experience a torque, it will start what? Rotating. This coil will start what? Moving. It will start turning. Now as this coil will turn, then what will happen to these springs? Like these two springs here. Imagine a situation in which I am twisting the coil. When I twist the coil, then what will happen? That these springs, this coil, these two springs will also get what? Twisted. Suppose I rotate the coil like this, then these hair springs will be applying a force in the what direction? Opposite direction. In fact, they will be applying a torque in the opposite direction, right? When I rotate the coil like this, then the hair spring you are saying here will apply counterbalancing torque. You can just imagine, I hold here a wire in my hand, I am trying to rotate. When I rotate the wire, this is like a spring, then the spring applies what? A balancing torque in the opposite direction. Very important. Now why are you using phosphor branch fiber especially? The spring you are seeing here are these two springs, they are made up of phosphor branch fiber. Why? Because this particular fiber, phosphor branch fiber, has got very low restoring torque. Meaning, when you try to twist it, it applies what? A counterbalancing torque. But it applies a very less counterbalancing torque so that you can twist it very easily. That means even if the current is small, current going through the coil is small, then also the coil will be twisted. If I put here spring made up of iron or steel, then a small current cannot be detected because small current will not be able to turn the coil. Why? Because the springs will apply what? A greater restoring torque. So it cannot be twisted. So I am using phosphor branch fiber because it has got a smaller restoring torque for 1 degree rotation. Means if I rotate the coil by 1 degree, then how much restoring torque the spring will apply? That's called what? Restoring torque for per unit twist, also called spring constant or spring factor. Clear? So what the working principle? It works on the principle that when a current is allowed to pass through a coil, it experiences a torque. Now the second thing is that you have to remember that magnetic field is always perpendicular to the area vector. Like suppose this is how the coil is placed. So this is the magnetic field, is parallel to the plane of the coil, and area vector is like this. This is area vector. So this angle which is saying theta will be always 90 degree. In this case theta is always 90 degree. Okay. Now let total number of turns of the coil is n, current is I, area of the coil is how much? A, the surface area is A, length into breadth, and magnetic field is equal to B. Then deflecting torque, I will be writing tau 1 is equal to NIAB sin theta. But remember, this coil has been placed in such a manner that theta is always how much? 90 degree. Very important. So the torque will not depend upon theta. It will only depend upon I. Very important. We want to make the deflecting torque depend only upon current, because N cannot be changed, A cannot be changed, magnetic field cannot be changed. Theta and current can only be changed. So theta we are making 90 degree. So that means this deflecting torque is going to depend only upon the value of current. So put here, but theta equals to 90 degree always. So we have tau 1 is equal to NIAB. So this will be always the torque acting on the coil, right? Now we have, as the coil will twist, then the spring will apply what? A counterbalancing torque, right? So see, one torque is trying to rotate, that is deflect because of current, and the other is trying to restore it because of its restoring tendency. It has elasticity, so it will try to prevent it from rotation. So when the two torques are equal and opposite, then suppose the coil was initially like this. Initially the coil was like this, and now the coil becomes something like this, and it stops. Here it is turning, here it is what? Stopping. So you can actually, we can measure by what angle it is what? Rotated. Right? Suppose this angle is alpha. For measuring this, actually here I have shown, this is a mirror. We use an arrangement called lamp and scale arrangement, but that's not required in your syllabus, so I will not be discussing. So the coil is rotating, and there are two torques acting. It is rotating because of what? This torque. But the spring will try to prevent it from rotation, applying a torque in the opposite direction, right? So when the deflecting torque is equal to the restoring torque, of the spring, then the coil will stop rotating, and then I can calculate by how many degrees it has what rotated. Now for every spring there is a characteristic what measurement for the restoring torque for unit twist. So I'll say let restoring torque for unit twist. You have to be careful with this word unit twist. Unit twist meaning for 1 degree rotation is K, and angle of rotation of the coil is equal to how much of alpha. Therefore, children, what is restoring torque? Restoring torque tau 2 will be K into alpha. Let's understand it. It means if I want to rotate by 1 degree, then the restoring torque will be K. So for alpha degree rotation, how much will be the restoring torque? K into alpha. And now children, when the two torques are equal and opposite, the coil will stop rotating, right? So children, we saw two torques. One is the deflecting torque, the other is restoring torque. Now we said when the coil will stop rotating, then both the torques are equal and opposite. So I will say here at equilibrium. Equilibrium means the coil is not turning, it has stopped turning. Then we will say deflecting torque is equal to restoring torque, meaning the coil is no longer turning, and deflecting torque is how much, children? NIAB is equal to K into alpha, right? Then how much is I? I will be equal to K upon NAB into alpha. Now children, I want you to understand this very carefully. K is a constant. For a given coil, N is constant, A is constant, and B is also constant because we are using a permanent magnet. That means everything here in the bracket is what? Constant. So K upon NAB is called galvanometer constant, and we can write this as kg. We write this what? Kg. If I put it here, then I is equal to kg into alpha. Now kg is a constant. As the name implies, galvanometer constant, meaning it is constant for a given galvanometer. So I can say I is directly proportional to alpha. Now this is a very important discussion. Meaning current is directly proportional to the what? Angle of deflection. Meaning more will be the current, more will be the deflection in this coil, right? If you plot a graph between I and alpha, then the graph will be like this. This result makes this device very what? Special. Because there is a linear relation between what? Current and angle of deflection. It means more the current, more the deflection. And now you can see here, I will put this also in the bracket. For every given galvanometer, the value of galvanometer constant kg can easily be calculated. Because everything out here is what? Known. K is known, N is known, A is known, and B is known. And then depending on the value of alpha and K, we can make a graduation and calibration here on a scale, and we can fix a pointer which will exactly read for us what is the value of the current, right? So that makes this instrument very special, because the current is directly proportional to the deflection of the coil or angle of rotation of the coil. Clear? So by knowing the value of kg and alpha, we can calibrate a scale to measure the current directly. I hope you have understood it. Now I will be discussing current and voltage sensitivity of a galvanometer. Okay. Now children, we are going to discuss what is current sensitivity. We understood that whenever current is allowed to pass through the coil, then the coil is getting deflected, right? And the coil is stopping only when the deflecting torque is equal to the opposite, equal and opposite to the restoring torque. Very simple. First, the coil will be deflected because of the current, and then the coil will stop because the restoring torque is acting on the coil in opposite direction. Clear? Now, The ratio of angle of deflection, divided by current is called current sensitivity. So children, current sensitivity defined as the ratio of angle of deflection divided by current. So therefore you can say current sensitivity is equal angle of deflection is alpha divided by I. This is current sensitivity. Let's understand what exactly is the meaning of current sensitivity of a galvanometer. See, a galvanometer will be more sensitive if it can detect even a very small current also. So how it can detect it? It can detect it if it gives a large deflection even for a small current. Okay? So a galvanometer will be more sensitive if it gives a larger deflection, means larger angle alpha for a smaller current I. Clear? Now let's see what is its value. Now children, alpha upon I is equal to how much you got? NAB by K, right? So that means an alpha upon I is what? Current sensitivity. So you can conclude from there, from this result, therefore we can say current sensitivity of a galvanometer is equal to NAB upon K. Okay children, often they ask you a question on how we can increase current sensitivity of a galvanometer. What are the factors on which the current sensitivity will increase? You can see here current sensitivity alpha by I is equal to NAB by K. So we can increase alpha by I by increasing the number of turns, put more number of turns by increasing the area, surface area of the coil, meaning you can use a bigger coil, by increasing magnetic field. Now this is very interesting, by increasing magnetic field, and for increasing magnetic field what you are doing? We are using concave poles. There are two things you are doing. We are using concave poles, and also at the same time we are placing a soft iron cylinder. Here we have a soft iron cylinder. So this soft iron cylinder captures the magnetic lines of force, and the concave poles are providing what? Radial magnetic field. Something like this, right? This is how it is, providing the magnetic field. Okay? So we can increase sensitivity by increasing number of turns, area of the coil, magnetic field, and for increasing magnetic field, two things we are doing. We are placing soft iron cylinder inside. The core is made up of soft iron cylinder, and we are using a magnet which is having concave poles, right? And then by decreasing what? By decreasing restoring torque for unit twist. Very important, this factor. If they ask you what will happen if a steel spring is used in place of phosphor branch fiber, so you will say that the restoring torque of steel spring will be much higher compared to that of phosphor branch fiber. Therefore, that the sensitivity will what? Decrease. So factors influencing current sensitivity are: number one, increases, I can say directly proportional to number of turns. Sensitivity directly proportional to number of turns, directly proportional to surface area of the coil, directly proportional to magnetic field, and inversely proportional to the restoring torque. So we understood how we can make it more sensitive: by increasing N, by increasing A, by increasing B, and by decreasing K. Right? Now there is another sensitivity you come across, that's called voltage sensitivity. Okay, voltage sensitivity of a galvanometer is what? Children, voltage sensitivity is the ratio of angle of deflection of the coil upon the applied voltage. Right? if we divide how much deflection has been produced in the coil by the applied voltage, then this ratio is called voltage sensitivity. And children, you know that V is equal to I into R, where R is the what? Resistance of the coil, and alpha upon I we already know is how much? Here NAB by K. So we have NAB by K into R. So this is called voltage sensitivity. So voltage sensitivity, how we can increase? By increasing N. So anyway, what is voltage sensitivity? Ratio of angular deflection and the applied voltage. Right? If you are trying to measure a voltage, then how much deflection is produced in the coil, if you divide by the voltage itself, then the ratio is called voltage sensitivity. And you can clearly see that we can increase the voltage sensitivity by increasing N, by increasing A, by increasing B. You know what is A now? Surface area of the coil. B is the applied magnetic field. And by decreasing, restoring torque for unit twist, and by decreasing the overall resistance. Right? So children, we understood what is a moving coil galvanometer, and we also understood how we can make it more sensitive with respect to current and also with respect to the voltage. And we understood its construction and working also, which have gone through. Now I will be discussing how we can convert, again an important topic, how we can convert a moving coil galvanometer first into an ammeter and then into a voltmeter. Now a question arises, what exactly is the application of galvanometer? Actually children, galvanometer is used not just to measure current but also to study currents. If the current, detect current, the current is very small, maybe it will not be measurable by an ammeter, because ammeter can measure only what? Large currents. But if the currents in milliampere are even smaller, then for detecting such current we require what? A galvanometer, right? But again you can ask, why galvanometer cannot be used for measuring a large current? Children, because galvanometer is a very sensitive device. If you connect it to a large source of current, if you try to measure a large current using galvanometer, its pointer here, aluminum pointer, will have so much deflection that it will be broken and your galvanometer will be spoiled. This is why galvanometer cannot be used for measuring large currents, right? So we can see how we can modify a galvanometer for measuring currents, which we do it in case of an ammeter, and similarly how we can convert this into a voltmeter. So basically galvanometer can be converted into an ammeter also and voltmeter also. So we will be seeing both the conversions now. Okay, let's start. Conversion of galvanometer into ammeter. Conversion of a galvanometer into an ammeter. Children, if I want to measure current, I will connect a galvanometer into series. Now, if I connect a galvanometer here in series to a source of current, this is terminal T1 and this is T2. If a large current flows to galvanometer, the galvanometer will be spoiled. That means I cannot use galvanometer directly by measuring current. Why? Because it cannot take a large current. So what will I do is, I will connect here a shunt S in what? Parallel. Now this shunt which you are seeing is actually very low resistance, is a very low resistance, and this whole arrangement is what you write is an ammeter. So why we are using a shunt in parallel? You see, if I connect a source of current here, then the current will travel like this. If the shunt is not there, the entire current will go through the galvanometer and galvanometer will be spoiled. So what I do is, I connect here a very low resistance in parallel. So what we see then, when the current I reaches here at this point, it splits into what? Two branches. One part of current goes through shunt and the other part of current goes through galvanometer. Clear? Now since shunt is what? Having very low resistance, so the larger amount of current passes through the shunt. Galvanometer is having a relatively higher resistance, So smaller amount of current will go through the galvanometer. So you can see that I'm inputting a large current here, and greater part of this current is going through the shunt. It's like a river carrying what? A lot of water. This bridge cannot take all this water, so we are putting what? A canal here, and we're branching the water and taking it away. Same thing I'm doing here. A large current will damage the galvanometer, so I'm connecting a low resistance in parallel called shunt. Now when the current I will travel, it will split in two branches. One is Ig through the galvanometer, and the other is Is through the shunt. So current has been divided, and since shunt has lesser resistance, the greater current will go through the shunt. So you can see that very less amount of current will go through the what? Galvanometer. Larger amount of current will travel through the shunt. So your galvanometer has been what? Saved from any damage. Okay. Let's make certain assumptions. In parallel called shunt. Shunt is a low resistance. It is being denoted by what? S. Right. So what is the principle of shunt? Principle of shunt. Children, shunt is used to divide current in a desired ratio. It is used to divide a large current to a desired ratio. Suppose the current to the shunt is Is and current to the galvanometer is what? Ig, and resistance of the galvanometer also will be writing as capital G. Keep in mind. So Ig into G is equal to Is into S. So from here I can write current through galvanometer divided by current through the shunt is equal to shunt upon galvanometer. Beautiful relation. Let's understand it. Suppose I am writing, let shunt resistance is 2 ohms and galvanometer resistance is 2000 ohms. Let's just imagine. Or maybe I say just 200 ohms. Clear? If I put it here, children, then I'll get Ig by Is is equal to S by G, and I assume S to be 2 and G to be what? 200. That means Ig by Is is equal to how much you got? 1 by 100. See the beautiful discussion out here. I've been able to divide this current I into what ratio? 1 is to 100. It means if 1 ampere current go through the galvanometer, how much current will go through the shunt? 100 ohms. So that means how much current you have total input? 101 ohms amperes you have input. If you input 101 amperes, then only 1 ampere will go through here, and then 100 amperes will go through the shunt. So you can see that only a very marginal amount of current is being allowed to pass through the galvanometer. So this is how galvanometer will not be damaged. Whereas if I don't have this shunt and I directly send 101 ampere, you can bet that the galvanometer will be spoiled. So this is what we are doing. We are dividing the current in the desired ratio. This is why this is the working principle of a shunt. Right? Now you will get numericals. They will give a certain, this current Ig, which is flowing through the galvanometer, is also called, Ig is called full deflection current. Full deflection current. And see children, I can use a scale. I can say when the input current is 101 amperes, then current through the galvanometer is 1. And then by using unitary method, we can design a scale which will directly read how much is the input current. Like this, if 1 ampere is current through galvanometer, then the total current is 101 ampere, right? So this way you can graduate a scale and you can directly read the value of current, right? Now, if I use Kirchhoff's first law, but I is equal to how much of children? Ig plus Is. So from here how much will be Is? Is will be equal to I minus Ig. If I put this value out here in equation 1, I'll call this equation 1. So if I go to equation 1, from equation 1, Ig divided by I minus Ig is equal to S by G. What will be the shunt resistance therefore? Shunt resistance is equal to Ig into G divided by I minus Ig. So if they give you numerical where you have to calculate shunt resistance required for a particular conversion, then I can use this formula. Clear? Children, we are going to discuss conversion of a galvanometer into a voltmeter. If somebody will ask you, what is the resistance of an ideal ammeter? Then what will you say? 0. You see, this is a galvanometer and I am connecting another resistance in parallel. Right? And the smaller is this resistance, the more effectively it will be able to distribute the current. Right? So resistance of ideal ammeter is 0. We want to minimize this resistance, and how we are doing? We are connecting a low resistance in parallel. But if I want to convert a galvanometer into a voltmeter, you know voltmeter is always connected in parallel. Like suppose I want to calculate what the potential is between points A and B, then I will connect a voltmeter in parallel. Now inevitably if a current I travels up to point A, then it has a tendency to go through the voltmeter also and also through the branch AB. But if the current goes through here, there will be a potential drop. So we want to make sure that minimum current goes into this branch and maximum goes through AB. So if you want minimum current to go through this branch, then you have to increase the resistance of this branch. Mind my words, in case of ammeter we wanted to decrease the resistance, we wanted all the current to pass. But here we do not want current to pass significantly through here. We want to minimize this current, we cannot make it 0. In ideal case, so this current should be how much? 0. But it cannot be 0, some current will always pass. So if I want to ideally measure the potential difference between AB, I will have to minimize the current here, and for minimize the current here, I have to increase the resistance. Very important. In ammeter I have to decrease the resistance, and for decreasing I am connecting in parallel. In voltmeter I have to increase the resistance. So for increasing resistance, what I have to do? For increasing resistance I have to connect a high resistance in series. So we conclude here that for converting a galvanometer into a voltmeter, so we for converting a galvanometer into a voltmeter, we will connect a high resistance into series. And if somebody will ask you, what is the resistance of an ideal voltmeter? Then what will you say? Infinite. Because only when the resistance is infinite, current flowing through this branch will be how much here? 0. Clear? So for converting a galvanometer into a voltmeter, we connect a high resistance in series. Clear? So what is effective resistance, children? Will be equal to R plus G, where G is the resistance of the galvanometer, right? So full deflection voltage, children, and what we are measuring? We are measuring full deflection voltage only. Deflection voltage. V is equal to I into R, so Vg will be Ig into R plus G. Ig is the full deflection current and Vg is the voltage which we are trying to measure, which is full deflection voltage. So from this relation we can say R plus G is equal to Vg by Ig. This shows that external resistance will be Vg by Ig minus G. So children, this is the external resistance which is required for converting a galvanometer into a voltmeter. So please know that we can convert a galvanometer into a voltmeter by connecting a high resistance R in series, and we can convert a galvanometer into an ammeter by connecting a low resistance called shunt in parallel. And what will be the resistance of an ideal ammeter? 0. Resistance of an ideal voltmeter will be infinite. Okay. So just go through this lecture and try to decipher the concepts. Okay.